Hi folks, how you doing? It's Mitch from Hard Intentions YouTube channel. And of course we also have hardintentions.com where we sell t-shirts, masks, and soon hats. So please check that out. We also have Teespring where you can get leggings and other things that we don't sell on our website. Excuse me. So, I got some DMs the other day from a guy who asked me about a person who was my cellie for a while at DVI, Tracy, back in the early 90s. And this guy's from Hermosa Beach. He grew up in Hermosa Beach. He was in the punk rock scene and skateboarding, all that good stuff that went on in LA at the beach areas, Redondo, Hermosa, all that stuff. He came to Tracy from Corcoran Shoe. His name was Joe Zoll. And I saw him bounce around the tier. He lived in D-Wing with me. And he saw me tattooing, and, he was big on getting tattoos and all that kind of stuff. And I was like, yeah, I'll tattoo on you. He's like, I got money, man. I said, I tattoo for money, A lot of guys tattooed for drugs and whatever. I tattooed for money. So anyway, he's the guy one time I was listening to my radio, and came up on my door and shit, and we were talking, he was on the tier, and I said, man, I'm about ready to throw my fucking radio off the tier. He's like, what's the problem, man? And I said, well, they play the same fucking crap over and over and over, the same, classic rock bands, and the same songs every day, every day, every day. You got to remember, that was long before the internet and Pandora or any of these other things where you can just log on and listen to music. And we were only allowed to have 10 or 12 tapes, or even at that time, there were no CDs, not in prison. So I said, man, I'm tired of this shit, It's just the same old crap all the time. And so he goes, I'll be right back. And he came up to my pad, and he slid some tapes under my door. He gave me the Misfits, Walk Among Us, Social D, and Black Flag the first 4 years. And he goes, check those out. I go, all right. What is it? And he goes, it's punk rock. And that was just probably the best band music in my life, because I loved it, I dug it, especially the Social D, I just thought that was the shit. And then I told him, what the hell's up with that music? How come they don't play it on the radio? And he goes, well, because it's punk rock, man. It's not mainstream music. And, then he, as I got to know him, I moved him in my cell to get some tattoo work. And, he would tell me a lot about his history, and his life and stuff out in the world. And he was right there in the punk rock scene, man, when it was shaping up in Los Angeles. He had all kinds of cool music. And, he would tell me about bleaching his hair till it was white, shaving a mohawk, egg whitening it, hitting it on the ironing board. So he had a mohawk that just, was straight up, you know what I'm saying? Joe was a character, man. He had pictures of him on the stage at a Black Flag concert, like, yeah, as a young kid, white hair, He was a hell of a dude, man. And he also would tell me stories about how, regular dudes, that, people didn't really understand the whole punk rock movement. They would fuck with them dudes, man, because some of them dudes had blue hair and mohawks and all that kind of shit. And, guys would drive by and throw bottles of piss at them, or, you know, throw rocks at them, jump out of the car and jump on them, beat them down. You know, they were always fighting with regular people. And, you know, the punk rock scene was, you know, now, you know, people walk around with blue hair and purple hair and all that shit like it's fashionable. But back then, you know, you got your ass beat for it. I mean, the way he described the stories, you know, it's like I was there. You know, uh, it was funny. But it was pretty cool, you know, to learn about all that stuff. And you know, Joe was kind of a high-strung dude, and you know, I had a kid in my cell, man, that I was tattooing on. He didn't really like the kid, and he used to fuck with him. And he's the kid that I told, hey, man, you go down in the kitchen, just put your fists up and say, you know, what do you want to do? And that was Joe, and he did it. And then Joe came back to the cell, you know, it's before we were cellies, and he says, you know, what you pumping heart into that kid, you know? And I told him, you know, what are you fucking with him for? You know. And so, you know, Joe was a little out there, man. I mean, sometimes he was, you know, high strung. And so what happened was Joe, I can't remember exactly how much time he did. It was like 5, 7 years, something like that, maybe 8 years. But he started off in Chuckawalla, you know, and you know, he got in a few fights. He got in some trouble, and his points went up, and they shot him over to Corcoran. And you know, he wasn't in Corcoran long, and he told me some guy was like, you know, fucking with him, you know, because he was young, and you know, even though he was tough, you know, punk rocker from the street, and he was from Hermosa Beach, and you know, he was with the business, but prison's a little different, man. I mean, you get shot if you fight, and you know, if you beat up the wrong guy, he might come and stab you, and it's a, you know, it can be a paranoid situation if you don't get schooled by the right person. It can be scary for guys, you know, like, well, what if I beat up this guy? What happens? You know, guys will tell you the wrong shit, you know, and so Joe's figuring it out, and so this guy was a bully, man, and he's like, yeah, I'm gonna take your food, you know, I'm gonna fuck you, and I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna do that, and Joe got tired of his shit, and beat the guy's ass pretty bad, from what I understand. So he ended up in the Corcoran shoe, and you know, he did his little shoe turn back there, and that kind of opened his eyes a bit and made him a little more paranoid. I think a little more. Joe was kind of a he was kind of a nut. I mean, he could get out there, you know. He was you know, he would start like trying to read things into things, you know, and activities or whatever he saw, you know, because and I think he learned that uh, you know, from being in the shoe and being in Corcoran and having assholes try to take advantage of him, fuck him around, treat him like he was some chump, not knowing who they were dealing with, you know. And so, anyways, in Corcoran, you know, he told me all this shit, and I was like, man, you know, that's fucked up, dude. And yeah, so he got his shoe, and they sent him to Tracy, and that's where I met him. And so I tattooed him down, you know. And moved in. I'll tell you what, the guy had some staying power because I would tattoo on him for 4 or 5 hours straight, you know. And I did his sleeves. I fixed his chest up. He had a couple things on his chest that I fixed up, and you know, I did his sleeves, and I did his back, and I don't think I did anything on his legs. Maybe a couple items. I'm not sure. But you know, I did some really neat space filler shit like dots, like dot. You ever see dot shade drawings? I did some dot shade skulls on there for space filler, and his back I did like a king, you know, sitting in a throne, and you know, it was pretty cool, man. His homeboy that DM'd me on Instagram told me, man, this back piece was gnarly, and you know, once Joe's tattoo work was done. Um, you know, he moved in with someone else. That's what I used to do. I used to move guys in, tattoo on them, you know, get paid, and then they would move out and move into another cell for the next guy to come in and get tattooed. And the guy after him was a guy named Timer from Orange County. But you know, but Joe and I used to kick it a little bit. You know, I'd see him on the weight pile. What's up, bro? You know, and all that shit. And you know, Joe was a savage. You know, he was with it, And I used to tell him, man, hey, you know, stay off that dope. And he really wasn't a doper, man. I remember one time we sat in the cell and we smoked some weed, and we played that song "Patience" from like GNR, and we just sat there, you know, and just finished smoking that weed, and he listened to that song. It was real quiet. We just sat there listening to the whole song, you know, just quiet. And he looked at me, he goes, man, that's a badass song, you know. And I go, yeah. He goes, dude, I'm into punk rock, and I really don't like them dudes. He goes, that's a badass song. I don't know if it was the weed or what, you know. It was the ambience, you know. Joe was a cool dude, man. And yeah, I thought, man, that's fucking, you know. So when Joe got out, you know, he went to San Francisco to a tattoo shop, and the person in the tattoo shop had helped me write the story that was published in Tattoo Review 29. And so he went in there, and I guess she took some photographs. This homeboy told me on the DM that she took some photographs of Joe's tattoos, and he said, you know, she acted like she knew the guy who did the tattoo work. And you know, Joe sent me some couple letters. You know, I called him a couple of times, and after he left, paroled, I moved to Donovan. I transferred down to Donovan. I called him down there, and I got a tattoo magazine with a tattoo convention, and there's Joe, you know, showing off my tattoo work at you know, the Ink Slingers Ball or something in L.A. And I called, and he said, "Yeah, I was at the Ink Slingers Ball." You know, he told me this and that, and I thought, man, that's cool. You know, the next time I called, I guess his girlfriend answered, and she was kind of standoffish. And it's been a minute, you know, since I called, because I don't like to bother people, man, with phone calls and all that bullshit. And you know, I noticed I didn't get another letter from my. I wrote him a couple letters. I didn't get a response, which really wasn't normal, you know. But and that was my big thing. Is I always wanted photographs of my tattoo work that I did on guys when they got out. You know, go get some decent photos and whatnot. I just thought that was pretty cool that he got my work in a tattoo magazine, representing an Ink Slingers Ball, you know, tattoo convention. And so anyway, I called one. Last time I called there, you know, some chick answered, and I said, "Hey, you know, I saw Joe in the tattoo magazine." She said, "Yeah, you know." And she was kind of standoffish, and I says, "All right, man. Well, you know, tell Joe, you guys send mine and all that shit. You know, send my love." And I had a homeboy of his with me at Donovan, a guy that knew Joe from the street too. Psycho Sexy. So yeah, his name was Psycho, and I used to call him Psycho Sexy, like, you know, the Red Hot Chili Pepper song, you know. But later on, man, I found out that Joe had died, and what happened was, you know, I guess he was out there fucking up, and you know, he got in a shootout with cops, and you know, he dumped his bullets out on the cops, and I don't think he hit any of them. But he saved the last bullet for himself, man, and shot himself, and killed himself because you know, he didn't want to go back to prison, and that's what prison does to people. You know, some people, you know, they do the time, and like I said, Joe had some issues with mental health, probably that he wouldn't admit. Um, uh, you know, guys won't admit that shit. It's hard for people to admit it, especially if they're tough guy gangsters, you know. And he was kind of a gangster, a tough guy gangster, you know. And you know, he always had the bandana, you know, and the shades, and you know, it was you know, back then you could have your own clothes, man. And Joe had Dickies button-up shirts and Dickies shorts, and you know, his Vans and shit. And he was always styling, you know. And a lot of them dudes are like, man, why is that guy dressed like that? I said, fuck, he's from L.A., man. That's how they get down, fool, you know. And yeah, he was a character, dude. And you know, I used to trip on people, you know, call it people watching, professional spectator, whatever. But I used to trip on Joe. I like Joe. I like seeing Joe doing his thing, you know. So, you know, he got out, man. The thought of going back to prison was just, you know, was just too much for him, you know. He just didn't want to do it. And, you know, shot himself. And, yeah, I remember him telling me stories, man, about, you know, he'd get out of jail or whatever. And, you know, the cops would see him and they tell him, hey, man, go down and live in Redondo Beach or go over here and live or over there or go to Venice or whatever. Or get the fuck out of Hermosa Beach. And he goes, you know, my parents live here, man. I grew up here. And they would tell me, you know, we don't give a fuck. You just get out of Hermosa Beach. I guess Hermosa Beach was a nice area at the time, you know. I don't know what it's like now, but, you know, he said them cops used to hassle him all the time. And, yeah, so, you know, in the end, he just decided to shoot it out with him and then, you know, take himself out the game when he only had one bullet left. And, yeah, I miss Joe, you know. And so, I guess the reason I want to do this video about Joe is, you know, keep his memory alive. Let everybody that knew him know, you know, when he was in the pen, he was quite a character, and you know, guys liked him, and he was a stand-up dude. He was fun to be around for the most part, you know, and he made some friends in there. And also because, like I said, you know, when guys are stand-up tough guys, man, they won't admit they have a mental illness. And, you know, now in prison, you know, the mental health program is called Triple CMS, you know, CCCMS, which I don't understand, I don't know what that was, and also EOP, which is another level of mental health. And so it used to be like, yeah, okay, guys did this, you know, whatever. They had issues. Um, certain prisons like CMF and CMC held mostly most of all the guys in the mental health program. Now they're all over the state in every prison. And so what was happening was, you know, guys would go to S&Y, they'd PC up, then they'd decide they don't want to be in S&Y, they made a mistake. So the only way they could get back to the main line was to go to EOP, it's an extended outpatient or some shit like that. And then they go down to Triple CMS, and then they go back to some main line somewhere. And they could say, well, you know, I came from this prison over here, which is, you know, I was Triple C. They call it Triple C. You know, I was Triple C over here, and, you know, I got off it. And, you know, and so people found out, man, that these guys were doing that. You know, they were working the system so they could pop in, because you got to know they got 34 prisons in California now. So a guy could be in a prison, PC up in a prison somewhere in the middle of the state, and then decide he wants to go to EOP and all that, and go to a prison down here in the northern part of the state, and then by the time he gets out, boom, on mainline again, he's in the southern part of the state. And so it's kind of hard to track his movements, especially if staff will give him bogus paperwork. Bogus paperwork is easy to get in prison. You can type a 115 saying some guy did something. You can type a witness statement saying the guy made a statement. And you can type a you know, paperwork saying the guy came from a certain prison. It's just a 128G, you know, General Information Chrono. So guys in the main line got wind of this shit, man, especially in level 4s, like, hey, these PCs are going to Triple CMS, you know, EOP, Triple C, and the main line to come back after they've dropped out and done whatever the fuck it is they're doing. So they put out little, you know, rules or whatever you want to call it. They put it out there like anyone who comes from EOP is getting stabbed. They're getting removed. I'm sure not all prisons stabbed them, but a lot of prisons, they were stabbing them dudes because they came from EOP to Triple C, and then, you know, oh, you came from Triple C program, and they'd say, yeah, I was EOP, and then so they'd stab them, or they'd 2-on-1 them and beat the holy living shit out of them, and they would disappear off to an S&Y yard. And a lot of them dudes were okay guys. They just had issues. So um, thanks the thank the S&Y guys for that. For fucking that up for regular old dudes that have mental problems that need help. Prison's kind of brutal, man. It's kind of looked down on, like shameful, if you say, hey, I got a mental problem. I got issues with my mental health, and I need some help. They got to get medication, counseling, whatever. People see them in the pill line at night getting pills, because they got to take some kind of pill to help them with their mental health. And, a lot of these dudes just, they couldn't deal with being in prison. They couldn't deal with the fact that they were in prison. So they would go, get help, mental health issues, they get help with that. And, it was looked down upon, it was frowned on, it was a weakness. And I didn't like that because a lot of the same guys that were frowning on it and looking down on it and all that kind of shit, they had issues too of their own. And they weren't stepping up to the plate and facing up to what their issues were. They would just slam, heroin or speed and get twacked out and cause problems on the yard over their fucking drug addiction rather than, just say, hey, I got a fucking issue and I need to get some help. Doesn't make you a weak ass motherfucker. It just means you're trying to figure it out. I was never in the mental health program. I didn't see any need for it, my problem was always I was in prison. I was never going to get out. And then once guys started getting out, my problem was, I'm in prison. I always thought I would never get out. Now I need to figure out how to get out. I always learned to look at problems logically, like what's the problem and then what's the solution. So a lot of guys can't do that. I mean, there was a guy down in Donovan, Condor, man. He had 2 life sentences, 2 15 to lives. And, he got twacked out on speed. He was walking around saying, this is all there is. We're never going home, blah, blah, blah. He went in his cell and bent down over the shitter, cut his neck open, reached in his neck, pulled the vein out, and cut the vein in half and killed himself because, he figured that all there ever was going to be was prison. And I guess that was unacceptable for him. He just couldn't do it. I used to play handball with that guy, pretty much 3 or 4 times a week we'd play handball. And, he was a pretty outgoing dude. He was cool, but, I'm sure he had mental problems, mental health issues that, he couldn't go get help for because people would look down on him for it. So, yeah, it's a sad deal, man. People with mental health issues, excuse me, in prison they get frowned on. So Joe had issues that but back then when Joe was in the pen, you could get help without being frowned on, and instead of just floating through the prison with some bullshit job, hanging out in the yard lifting weights and getting tattooed, there was no avenue for him to say, hey, what's up with my mental health, yeah, so he ended up shooting himself on the street, and that's sad. So, if you got issues with mental health, don't be afraid to reach out. There are hotlines that you can call, and if you're in the pen and you've got issues, figure out how you can get some help without jeopardizing your safety. I'm sure there's a way to do it. Yeah. Don't do it alone, people. Take care of your mental health the hard way. And Joe, wherever you're at, brother, hey, my heart's out to you. I hope you're in a better place. We love you guys. Take care, and we'll see you next time.